Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I've been asked a few times to make this video and I'm excited to do it because I think it's going to make for some really good content. Anyway, if you've been following along, you know I have two pretty cool adventure / touring bikes. So the main question is, if you could only pick one, would it be the Grand Touring Harley Davidson line or something more like the BMW adventure style bike? So we're gonna get into my perspective, the type of adventures I've had on them, a little bit about my background and why I like each bike, and we'll go into pros and cons, and hopefully I can help you guys out. We'll start with the Harley. Let's get it in the garage. It is the beginning of the off season here. A little chilly out, so we're gonna warm the garage up. So let's start off a little bit about my background so you can understand my motorcycle experience. I grew up in the off-road world. I grew up racing enduros, motocross, that type of stuff, trail riding with my friends. So this was everything that I lived, I ate, I breathed, like it was everything to me. This is what kept me out of trouble as a kid. So I think that will kind of show you why the GSA kind of pulled my attention a little bit. I didn't have a ton of experience with just street bike riding. When I was 16, I did get my motorcycle license. I purchased an SV650, the naked version, and I was just extremely immature, riding it like it was a dirt bike. After a season, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna sell this, I'm gonna go back to the dirt because I'm either gonna end up dead or without a license, which I think was a smart decision. So I kind of stayed away from the street for a while until I was a bit older. I calmed down a little bit. I had other street bikes since then, but that's where we're at. So my roots is in the off-road, and then as I got older, I started to really enjoy kind of exploring, adventuring. I'm a total weekend warrior. I am a family man. So if the wife has nothing going on and she doesn't mind me sneaking away, I go off for, maybe 1, 2, 3 days tops when I'm lucky. I did do one 5-day trip that was incredible. But that's, when I say touring, that's what I'm doing. I'm using these bikes on weekend warriors. I like to get as far away as I can in that little bit of time, see everything I can, see some cool sights, enjoy my time away, and then come back home. Okay, now we get the Harley in the garage and the stove is starting to warm up a little bit. Let's talk. So if you're new to the channel, this is a 2019 Street Glide Special with the 114 motor. Nothing too crazy, stage 1, just some bars, a couple other little things I added. I have upgraded the suspension. I've done Legends in the rear and the Legends front cartridge kit in the front end of the bike. Other than that, just kind of some small cosmetic things I like the lowers and the handguards and stuff. Changed out the seat too. When I'm talking about Harley Davidson, it's pretty much just the touring line in general. They're all very similar, minus the Road King doesn't have any music. I'm a big fan of music while riding. Maybe you're not. That's my only drawback with the Road King, although they do look really cool. So there's a lot to be said about Harley Davidson. When I was first looking for a motorcycle, right before I purchased this bike, I was bouncing back and forth between a Street Glide and the BMW GSA. I was actually leaning towards the GSA, but my wife really liked the Harley. And it was also during COVID. It was very hard to find bikes. And actually on our anniversary, our wedding anniversary, we went away and we just happened to pop in to Laconia Harley Davidson in New Hampshire, and this bike was on the floor. It was used. I bought it, I think maybe 3,200 miles, something like that. It was all stock except for the stage 1 kit, which was just Reinhardt slip-ons, K&N air filter, and then the tune. Everything else I've done to it. And she really loved it. I really loved it. So we purchased a bike. And I've ridden some of the touring bikes before this, but obviously I've never owned one. So this is my first touring bike that I've owned. And I was really surprised with this machine. The more that I rode it, the more capable I saw. You know, I'd get 500, 600, 700 miles in a day, and I was like, I can't believe I am still comfortable. I still want to ride. Like, it was very impressive. Another thing this bike really made me fall in love with was cruise control. So much so, I don't know if I could ever purchase a touring bike without cruise control. You know, a smaller bike around town, no problem. But for something that I'm going to put big miles on and do some traveling, cruise control is like a must. First world problem, right? So let's go into some of the pros and cons. We'll start with the pros. All right, let's get into the pros of the Street Glide. Number one, and this is by far the biggest, is the Harley Davidson culture. It's huge and it's unlike anything else I've ever seen. There is a general motorcycle culture out there where we're all kind of looking out for each other, you know, all bikers kind of like each other, that type of stuff. Harley's something different. It is so easy to find a community with Harley Davidson. I've noticed that when I purchased my first Harley, anytime I'd stop for gas or just stopped anywhere, stopped at a restaurant, somebody was coming over to come talk to me about my bike. I didn't have that experience with any of my dual sports or, you know, Japanese bikes or anything like that. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. But if you're looking for community, Harley Davidson community is just amazing. And I will say this, you may have the most badass bike out there. I don't care whatever brand, make, model it is, whatever you think the most badass bike is out there, chances are the most badass riders out there are on Harleys. I by far have seen more people that have traveled more miles on these bikes than anything else. And there's something to be said for that. Like, the community is just absolutely incredible. So if you want to go out there, you want to meet other like-minded people that want to ride, they want to travel, or even if you're like me doing weekend warrior type stuff, no matter where you go on a Harley, you're going to find people. No problem. Pro number two on the Harley is just long-term comfort. You can cover some serious miles on this motorcycle and be extremely comfortable. Between the bigger fairings and the seat and just your position, also having music, it is just extremely comfortable ride. You know, I've done 600, 700, even 800 miles in a day and still had gas in the tank ready to ride. And I mean gas in the tank, like physically, I could still put more miles down if I wanted to. Yes, you do have to move around, highway pegs. I like to ride solo most of the time. If I'm doing big trips, I'll put my feet up on the passenger floorboards or pegs, whatever you have. You know, move around a little bit, but by far the most comfortable ride for the big mile days. Pro number three, and this is a big one as well, and this kind of leads into the culture too, is there's Harley Davidson dealerships everywhere. Not only dealerships, but also mom and pop shops. If you run into any problems on the road, there are plenty of people that can help you out. The parts are everywhere. They're actually relatively pretty easy to work on as far as motorcycles go. They're not too high tech. And that'll lead into pro number four, reliability. Even before I was a Harley person or even rode Harley, I used to hate them. I thought they were ugly and stupid, and you know, this is a dirt bike kid talking at that time. Everybody said the jokes, Harley leak oil everywhere, that type of stuff. It's just not the case in today's day. If you keep your bikes relatively stock, you don't build crazy, you know, motors or anything like that. Of course, there are some incredible builders out there, but in general, if you keep them relatively mild, they're extremely reliable, especially if you do your basic maintenance, which is not a lot. It's very, very easy to take care of these bikes. So that's a major plus for Harley Davidson, is just the reliability. And then of course, the network of people who can work on your bike, have the know-how of your bike and parts availability. So we'll do 5 pros and 5 cons on each bike. So pro number 5 is the engines. So the 114, I've ridden a 103, and I've ridden some of the older bikes, and then the 114. The motors are in stock form or stage 1. They're nothing to write home about. They're not crazy. It's not going to rip your arms out of your shoulders or anything like that. But it is good, healthy, easy to use power and torque, which I think also helps with the big mile comfort. Like, they're just good motors. And of course, most people love the Harley sounds. Even this bike, just slip-ons. It's not loud in the world of Harley, but after jumping off my BMW and then getting on the Harley, this bike is much louder, and it's cool to have that sound. And when I say, like, you just feel cool. And I don't mean that in like, I think other people are looking at me being like, yeah, this guy's cool. No, not at all. I just feel cool riding it. And I think some of you will know what I mean when I say that. But so that's pro number 5. All right, the fun part, the cons. So, con number 1 of the Harley Davidson, the touring bikes, I would say is weight. These things are heavy. They're 850, 900 pounds before you load them down. They are heavy. So that is something to be considerate of, especially if you don't have any experience with the bigger bikes. They could be a little tricky maneuvering around parking lots, things like that. Con number 2, and actually this was probably my biggest gripe with this bike. If you've seen some of my older videos, even my review of this bike, this was my biggest gripe. And also keep in mind, again, what I said in the beginning of this video. My background is I'm an off-road dirt bike rider. So number 2 is suspension. And it's hard to be, I have to be realistic in this. It is an 850, 900 pound bike that is designed for the street. So the suspension is not going to be what I am used to as an off-road rider. But if you get on a road that is less than perfect, you know it. You're going to feel it. Now, I spent quite a bit of money on suspension upgrades for this bike, and it has, improved it quite a bit for what it is, and I'll leave it at that. It's not an off-road machine, and when you live somewhere like me in the Northeast and you ride from Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, there's just a lot of rough roads. Our winters are not easy on our roads up here. There's potholes and just frost heaves that raise everything up. Now, if you get onto a nice paved highway, it's beautiful. It's like riding on glass. But yeah, suspension is my biggest con. Con number 3, and I'm throwing this number right from my hip, but I would say probably 90% of Harley Davidson riders do not like these bikes in stock form. They need to add bars, they need to add seats, they need to change everything. At the price point that you pay for one of these bikes, used or new, you have to put a lot more money into them to get it to how you like it, how you want it. I'm gonna put that as a con just for the financial expense. I know that it is fun to purchase these upgrades, to install the upgrades. It's fun watching your bike come together. I totally get that. That side of it is a pro, but just the money that you have to put into these bikes to get them to where you want it is an expense, especially when you're spending, close to 30 grand or even a little over 30 grand on one of these bikes brand new. Con number 4 for me, and it doesn't bother me too much as I buy my motorcycles to ride them, not to stare at them. But the paint on Harley Davidsons is so easy to scratch. So if you're somebody who is really, really particular on how your bike looks, you're gonna wanna do like ceramic coating or something like that, protect it, because it is so easy to scratch these bikes, especially black. It doesn't bother me so much. Again, I've even dropped this bike once into the sand. Long story, but I laughed about it. I had a friend that was with me, was all worried. He thought I was going to be pissed off, and nope, it added to the adventure, and still to this day I laugh about it. Actually, luckily, I don't even think I really did any damage to it, but that was part of the adventure of it. So they do take a beating if you're going to really ride these bikes. So be aware of that and take the precautions you need to care for the paint. And the last con, and this is the reason I ended up with a BMW, is in my opinion, you're pretty limited to where you can go with this thing. Now, the United States of America has so many amazing places to go and explore. Now, you could probably go tons of places, never touch a dirt road, and in your whole riding career, and never run out of places to go, like, period. But some of those really cool places that I want to go requires dirt roads or maybe some trails, and this bike is just not able to do that. Leading to the point of it's not a do-it-all bike. You'll need another bike to, explore some of those adventures. Okay, so that wraps up the Harley Davidson. Let's pull the BMW inside and let's talk about that bike. Okay guys, let's talk BMW. If you're new to the channel, this one here is a 2023 R1250 GSA. And the A stands for adventure, which is a larger fuel tank, and the upper crash bars, and I believe that the frame is slightly different than the standard GS. This is my very first BMW motorcycle. I've never owned any other BMW, and I will say that I was pretty blown away by this machine on many levels, so we will go into that. When I purchased this bike, it had street tires on it. I don't know exactly what they were, if they were like an 80 street or a 20 off-road. My guess is they were probably close to like a 90 street, maybe a 10, or maybe they weren't even meant for the dirt at all. But I did tackle some dirt roads with it and some very, very, very light trails, nothing crazy. I have since put on a true 50/50 tire, which has changed this thing dramatically, and we can talk about that as well. But let's get into pros and cons real quick. So pro number one on this motorcycle. So when I bought it, I wanted an adventure bike, something that I could take off-road. I was thinking, light trails, back roads. We've talked about the suspension on the Harley. This has much better suspension. So I knew the back roads, the dirt roads, and the light trails would be a much better thing. The pro was actually a surprise. I had no idea how good of a street bike this GSA is. Like I said, when I first purchased it, it did have street tires on it. I do have the metal side cases that I purchased, and I took an adventure up to Quebec City from where I am in Massachusetts. I went all the way up, all the way back down, did a bunch of loops through the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and came home, doing about 1,100 miles. I was blown away at how good of a street touring bike this is. So that's something to say, that this thing can do trails, dirt roads, and yet still be an incredible street bike. So that's definitely pro number one. Pro number two on the BMW is all the electronic options that this bike comes with. You can easily switch between a street mode, a dynamic mode, which is kind of like your hot rodding through the corners. You have an enduro mode, which is all your settings to do your trails and that type of stuff. Turns off traction control, and I think it adjusts your ABS settings a little bit too. And there's also a rain mode and an eco mode. And then there's actually two extra options. There's a Dynamic Pro and an Enduro Pro. And those two settings are Pro as in programmable, not as in Pro you have to be really good to use it. So you can go in and you can tweak the traction controls and ABS settings a little bit. Along with all those electronic options, the rear shock electronically adjusts for how much weight you have on it, which I think is really, really cool. So it doesn't matter if you have a passenger, if you have a ton of luggage, anything like that, that rear shock is going to adjust your sag just by what weight you have in the rear. That's a really cool feature, especially being an off-road guy, suspension-wise. This thing checked all the boxes. Pro number three, this might be just a personal one. It may not be for you if you're looking at different adventure bikes, or maybe you don't have something like a Street Glide to compare it with. Relatively speaking, this is still a heavy motorcycle. I think it's close to 600 pounds. But when I jump off my Street Glide and I hop onto this BMW, it feels extremely light, extremely nimble. Of course, I think a lot of it has to do with the weight being low with that engine. Of course, it does have the big fuel tank. And also just the rider position. I will say that in the trails, once this thing starts to tip and it's going over, it's going over. So that's why we got these. Don't even bother trying to catch it. It's too heavy for that. But riding around town, like if I just want to run into town real quick, grab something, I'll probably jump on the BMW because it's just light, nimble. You can cruise around, no problem. The Harley feels big, bulky. So that's pro number 3. Pro number 4 for me is this bike is pretty darn good right out of the box. You do not really need to spend any money on it to get a comfortable motorcycle to travel with. I've done very, very little to this thing. I didn't want to use BMW's GPS, so I purchased a quad lock mount, which I have one on my Harley anyway. So I just purchased the mount. I use my phone for GPS. I usually use Waze. And the only other thing I purchased was the metal boxes, which are off of it right now. As you can see, it's dirty. I've been riding it off-road. And then for a little protection, I bought these. That's all I've done to this motorcycle. And again, I've traveled 1,100 miles. I've brought this thing into the woods. I will add a heavy-duty skid plate underneath. The stock one is working for me at the moment, but I will buy a better one. You can obviously, of course, spend a crazy amount of money on this motorcycle. You can upgrade all the lights. You can upgrade the suspension even further. As any motorcycle, you can do all types of wild stuff. But in my opinion, right out of the box, this thing comes far better equipped, ready to tackle the road and adventures. The final pro for this bike is it's just the do-it-all bike. This thing really will take you anywhere. I've put this thing into places you really should only have a dirt bike. It's challenging. I made it through though. I've done crazy long weekend trips on this motorcycle and have been completely comfortable. Yeah, the seat's not as good as the Harley Davidson, but it's pretty darn good. So it really is kind of a do-it-all bike. If you want to take this thing, go travel to every corner of the United States and really have no barriers or no walls stopping you, this might be your bike. That's probably one of the biggest pros of this motorcycle. Okay, now it's time to get into the cons. Con number 1, for the off-road stuff, it is heavy. This is a very heavy motorcycle. I don't think, had I not had all the off-road experience that I had, I wouldn't be very comfortable to bring this thing in the woods. You know, like I said, I've had years and years and years of off-road experience. I've put dirt bikes into some really wild stuff. Not trying to toot my own horn, I'm nothing crazy on a dirt bike, just saying that I do have off-road experience. I think without that, I definitely would have been lacking, a little nervous to bring this thing into the woods, into the trails. And even with my experience, I have dropped this thing several times. And I think that is really important to understand. If you're going to do that type of stuff with this motorcycle, or really any motorcycle, you don't want to buy a bike that you're afraid to drop. You don't want to do that. I knew right off the showroom floor, this bike was going to hit the dirt. It doesn't bother me when it does. This bike's going to get scratches. I bought it for the adventures, not for the bike itself. Same thing I did with the Harley. This one even more so. Con number 2, and this one really bothered me, and maybe that's just because I'm an American and, you know, we have freedom in our blood. When I first purchased this motorcycle, I went to the parts department and I said, can I please purchase or order a service manual for my motorcycle? And they went, no. I went, what do you mean, no? Apparently, BMW doesn't want people touching their own bikes. They want you to bring it to the dealer, and they won't even allow you to purchase a service manual. Now, I will say that my dealer was extremely cool, and they said, whatever you want torque specs, that type of stuff, let me know, we will give them to you. So kudos to them, Max BMW in Troy, New York. They were really, really cool about that. But BMW, you got 2 thumbs down on that. That kind of like disgusted me. I did not like that. Of course, with the internet, you could find out how to do anything. I just not a fan of that. That's probably my biggest gripe of the BMW. Con number 3 for me, it very well could just be my personal experience. I'm finding it a little bit more challenging to find like-minded riders in the BMW community. With the Harley, it was extraordinarily easy to go out, meet new people, find new people to ride with. It was like you post something on the internet, and I got 10 people who are like, hey, I'm close to you, let's hook up, let's ride. I'm just not seeing that with the BMW. I do put posts on different Facebook groups asking for people if they want to ride, and this isn't even just BMW related, just adventure or even trail riding, and it's like the community's not as active. Maybe that won't be the case in your area. You know, maybe it's just who I am personally. I don't know, but that has been a big con for me. I've been doing most of my riding on this thing solo. In fact, the one time that I did meet up with some people, they were on Harleys. So yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. This next con, you can see this bike has a single-sided swing arm, which I guess could be a pro and a con. You know, if you're stuck on the side of the road, you can put it up on the center stand. You can easily get your wheel pulled off. But my only experience that I've had so far is that nobody could mount. They could mount, but they couldn't balance the tire. I had to bring this wheel to the BMW shop, which is about 50 minutes away from me. I have 3 shops that are local to me. None of them could balance this wheel because of the size of the hole that's in here. So to me, it's kind of a con. And the last con that's really not a big deal, but I will mention it because it should be said. Now, these bikes are shaft driven, which the idea behind shaft driven is it's really supposed to be maintenance free. But BMWs are well known that dirt and grime gets all inside this boot and all over the drive shaft in there. So you do need to periodically kind of pull that apart, clean it all out, and grease it up well. So yes, it is a shaft-driven system that's supposed to be kind of a maintenance-free thing. It's not maintenance-free. Now, I don't mind doing it. It's not that big of a deal, but it is a con. Well, that kind of wraps up our pros and cons. You know, they're both absolutely incredible motorcycles. If you just want what's the better bike on paper, it's the BMW, hands down. What's going to bring you the better adventure, or maybe the adventure that you like the most, that's where it gets tricky. And in fact, if I'm going to be honest, if I had to pick the GSA or the Harley, I don't know if I could give you an answer very easily. You know, I think I would probably get more use out of the BMW. I think I would. But, you know, I enjoy bringing one of my daughters riding. She loves to come. My wife likes to come with me sometimes. They have no interest in the BMW. They want to come ride on the Harley with me. They like that. You know, that's important to me. So that's a big factor there. It's not an easy decision. If you have both of these bikes, let me know. Do you agree with some of these points? You know, which one would you choose? I really don't know. I think if I was looking at it as just my personal experience, what I want, I think I would pick the BMW. I think, but at the same time, like, I really like the social aspect on the Harley. Like, if I wanted to go out and meet new people, it's way easier to do it on that. So I really don't know. They're both incredible bikes. Again, if you were just going to look at stats, paper, how much money you need to put into them to be comfortable to actually travel the country or do what I'm doing weekend warrior wise, it'd be the BMW. But if what you want to do is go out and meet the community and meet new people and go on awesome rides, if you enjoy doing stuff like you know, different type of motorcycle rides or, you know, runs like they do, like Toys for Tots type rides, 90% of those people are on Harley Davidson, you know, and it's kind of cool to be a part of that. It's a cool feeling. It's like a brotherhood. You feel that a lot more in the Harley Davidson world. And that's pretty cool. So anyway, guys, I hope my pros and cons helped you out. Maybe it confused you more. I don't know. It's not an easy decision. Like I said, both motorcycles are incredible bikes. I am just fortunate enough to own both. If you were able to do that, you know, or even for the longest time, I thought maybe I'll keep the Street Glide and buy something smaller like a Yamaha Tenere to kind of scratch the off-road itch. I think the Tenere would probably be a better trail bike than that BMW. But then since I've owned it, I'm like, holy cow, it's such a good street bike. I don't want to give it up for something smaller. You know, now I'm like, well, maybe I'll just buy another, you know, dirt bike for the trails. But I guess that's the problem of being a motorcyclist, right? You can never have enough bikes. But I would say if you wanted to just say, what's the do-it-all bike, the BMW wins. But I can't give you a simple yes. If I could only pick one, it would be the Harley, or yes, if I could only pick one, it'd be the BMW. It'd probably end up being Harley because my wife would influence me. I don't know. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. If it did help you in any way, smash that like button. If you like this content, if you want to see some adventures that I have on these bikes, plus other things I do, I hope you consider subscribing, and we'll see you guys in the next video.